Okay guys, today I'm going to be doing a video and show you that there is a shadow rendering problem in Grand Theft Auto 5, especially on modern hardware, because I feel like that the shadows don't look right, and I wanted to make a video to show you exactly what I mean with this. So you can see that I am rendering in pretty, I'd say, decent hardware for 2023. It's an RTX 3070 and a Ryzen 5 5600X. And if we go to settings, this is what I'm playing at. You can see that this is 1440p, of course, on a 1610 screen, so it's 2560 by 1600 instead of 1440. MSAA is at X4, and I have turned off VSync just so you can get the full frame rate instead of what's locked to my monitor. Everything else should look like this on modern hardware with very high, ultra, etc. And then you have the soft shadows generally turned to Nvidia PCSS, right? Because that's the one at the very right. Now I'll just quickly show you my advanced graphics, which should look like this. Again, keep in mind this game came out in 2015, so it's almost 10 years old now. So this is what the settings should look like for people gaming in 2023. So you'd think that you're gaming in high settings or max settings, and then this is what the shadows look like. And I mean, what the heck is this? Is this like the highest possible shadows? Come on, this is not real, right? I mean, look at this. So this is just ultra blurry shadows. And here we have a fence, and you can see that the fence doesn't even have shadows, or that they're barely visible, right? So people just play like this thinking that this is the ultra setting. But then check this out. You go back to settings, and then to graphics, and then you go to soft shadows, and instead of Nvidia PCSS, you select sharp. Okay, let me apply the changes, and look at this. Look how amazing the shadows look like now. They're like super detailed. You can see even the individual leaves and everything. And if we go to the fence real quick, you can see how nicely the shadows look, right? They're a bit aliased, of course, but if you stand close to them, you can actually see the shadows of the fence. Now, the problem with the sharp shadows is that they actually look too sharp. I mean, this kind of looks like it's drawn on. I mean, if you look at the branches and everything, they look so sharp that it looks like a PS2 game's shadows. So what you want to do is you want to get like a compromise between softness and sharpness. And oh, by the way, if you look at my frame rate, let me just stand over here. If you look at my frame rate, it's at about 112 FPS, right, thereabouts, at sharp shadows. So now let's go back to settings and go to the original graphics setting, which was Nvidia PCSS. And you can see how blurry it becomes, and you have a massive FPS drop, because you're like down to 90 now from 112 or something. So that's a huge FPS drop, and the shadows look like absolute crap. So why would you even want this? So if we go to settings and we select the next worst setting, which would be AMD CHS instead of Nvidia PCSS, it looks a lot better, doesn't it? Now, it also has a huge frame drop, because I'm also at around 90 FPS now instead of 110. But the shadows look very realistic. And if you walk away from them, you don't really see much of a difference in terms of the resolution and everything. If you look at them from real close and a bit far away, you can see that they get a bit blurrier, but not by a whole lot. Now, this is, of course, in my opinion, the best option for people who have high-end hardware and can afford the frame drop, is instead of selecting Nvidia PCSS, you want to select AMD CHS. Because again, Nvidia PCSS looks like this. okay? There's like no leaves, nothing visible. It's just a blurry mess, and it has even more of a frame drop, like 88 FPS. But if we go back to AMD CHS, it looks a lot better, and the frame rate is around the same. Like I said, if you don't have the hardware to run it, what you can do is you go to graphics and then start with the sharpest shadows, which is sharp, and you select that, and it looks almost as good as the AMD CHS, right? But suddenly you're back at 107, 108, 109 FPS. So you just gained massively FPS while still having great looking shadows. So this is like, in my opinion, the best option for people who have low to mid-range PCs. And if you don't like the shadows to be this sharp, because they kind of look aliased and drawn on, you can start with using soft shadows instead of the sharp ones. So we go back to graphics and then we go to soft. And instead of 110 FPS, we now are at around 100 and, well, we're still at 110. So we didn't really lose much in terms of FPS. But the shadows are a bit softer. Like if I walk towards them, you can see that they get sharp. And if I start walking away from them, they get a bit softer. See that? It's not really that noticeable. So this is like a good compromise. Now, if you want them to be a little bit softer, you can of course go back to settings, go to graphics, and then go to softer shadows, which I think is like the perfect balance between sharpness and softness. However, it does take an additional FPS hit because now I'm at 104 FPS instead of 108. But you can see that the shadows are softer, right? You can see that they don't have that hard edge anymore and they look better. But at the same time, if you walk towards the wall and you get the high resolution shadows rendered, there will be more of a noticeable transition. See, if I walk close to it, you can see that now they look super sharp, and if I start walking away from it, you can see that they get blurry. So this is a kind of a box, I guess, around you that makes the shadows sharp, and then you start walking away from it and it gets blurry again. And this becomes more noticeable the softer your shadows are. So right now we are at about 105 FPS. And if I now go to settings and I go to softest shadows, I am now down to 102 FPS. So again, a little bit more FPS drop. Shadows perhaps look a little bit more realistic, I don't know. To me, they look a little blurry, like too blurry. And this is especially evident when you start walking towards the wall, because then you will notice that suddenly they get like rendered really high in high details, and then when you start walking away, you can definitely notice that line that keeps following Franklin here, how the shadows get soft, and then when you walk towards them, they get sharper. So if you want to avoid that sort of box, that, I mean, you can't really avoid the box, but you can make it less obvious if you make the distant shadows a little sharper than this blurry, because then that line or that box doesn't become as obvious. So here, for example, I guess you can't really see the fence anymore, but you know you can see it over there, because right now it's about 11:30, so the shadow's a little bit shorter. But you can see that the fence is kind of blurry, especially if I walk a little bit away from it. You can barely see the fence being shaded properly. But now if I go and I change this down to softer shadows instead of softest, it gets a little bit sharper. Can you see that? It gets a little bit sharper and better looking, even if you're standing away. And if you walk close to it, there's not much of a transitioning difference, right? So you don't lose much quality. I guess you do over there. Like right there is probably where the border is, but it's not as noticeable. Like if I walk close to the wall, you can still see it. You can still see it, And if you want to also get rid of that, then again, what you need to do is to settle for a sharper shadow. Just change this down to soft, and now you can see that it's sharper, and if you walk away from it or towards it, there's barely any difference. So you can't really trace that box anymore, you know, that box of sharpness that follows you around and then makes the shadows sharp. I mean, I guess you could see it like right there a little bit, but it is so negligible now that it doesn't really bother you when you play the game. Anyway, we sort of lost the shadows because it got cloudy, so you can still see it right there, the fence, and if I walk away from it, it's still there. So this is, in my opinion, the best setting for the shadows, because it just doesn't like become so visually obvious anymore compared to all the other variants. So my recommendation is to go to settings, graphics, and then keep the soft shadows at soft. If you make it sharp, they're going to look like they're drawn on, and if you make it softer, you'll just have that bigger difference when you get close to a shadow and it changes to the high resolution mode, and then it'll be more obvious. So this is, I think, the perfect setting, and it also gives you really good FPS compared to the AMD variant, which subtracts another 20 FPS. Because look, there's not much of a difference between this, which is soft, and changing to the AMD CHS, except the massive frame drop, because right now we're about at 100 frames, and if I change this to AMD CHS, there's not much of a difference, but suddenly I'm at 86 FPS. So I lost a huge deal of FPS with barely any visual improvement, which is why I recommend that the best setting is soft. That's it. So I hope you guys like this video, and leave a like if you think that it helped you out, and hopefully you will not have any shadow problem anymore. See ya.